Good morning. Welcome to Sales Chatter, the logistics podcast where we aim to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed, aka the Logistics Monk. And wait a minute. Let's just wait a minute. I don't see a cowboy to the right of me today. Today, it's a special day. We got the man himself, Dan Deigan, the host, the amazing sales guru, the Imagine. Just kills it every day. So we're happy to have Dan Deigan come back. He's making his triumphant return. So welcome back to Sales Chatter, Dan. What's going on, brother? Talk to me.
Thanks, brother. Actually, I should probably be the co-host, and you should be the host. No, isn't that how it works?
We're working out the
I've
kinks.
been in bed
Like,
for 6
does that come
months,
with a
so
salary bump? We'll talk about that offline a little bit.
unfortunately, no, brother. How you doing, my man?
I've been great, man. I've been great, having a lot of fun. Looking forward to when we can actually do this again. So we're excited. It's Data Day, the best day of the week that we always have with our main man Dean. But yeah, let's talk, man. Let's talk a little bit before we kind of hit the intro and bring Dean on and talk about March imports. Where you been? For a lot of people who are seeing you for the first time, like that's crazy. For the first time they're seeing you today. Let's get a little background.
Well, you know, it's I wanted to just, in essence, disappear. And the reason being is just I've had so many complications with my health, brother. Like it would take an hour just for me to share everything I've been through in the last 7 months. But for anyone that says the treatment's worse than the recovery is lying. I just pneumonia constantly, DKAs in and out of the hospital. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to disappear and kind of just really focus on recovering, really focus on my health, really focus on just going inside and finding the next level. Because for anyone that's ever been through a life-altering disease, you come out with a fire. And if your body's not ready to help you run with that fire, it's more frustrating than anything, like to the point where, started to get depressed and everything because I want to go and I got so many things I want to do, but my body's just lying in bed. So I needed to focus on me. I needed to focus on my recovery. I mean, I didn't even watch the show for so long because it was just 85-90% of the day I was sleeping. Like I was literally, the dogs loved it because I was on the same pattern as them, where they're sleeping 16 hours a day and just sleep. But like our bodies are just incredible. I don't even know what to call it, but just incredible things, because I'm back and I'm ready to go, man. So thanks, buddy.
Oh, well, speaking of that, we can't get started without hitting our intro. Let's go.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
And first and foremost, I just want to thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely get into that a little bit more, most likely tomorrow and Friday as well. Again, dive deeper into that. But it's Data Day, Let's get hype a little bit. The March numbers, the dust has settled. We're watching an amazing Data IQ live show yesterday. Dean, welcome. Always a pleasure to have you, my man. How's everything on your end?
Yeah, great. Always save my so I'm a hardwired introvert, right? So to get pumped up for a show like this, when you said let's get wired up, like I got to put my extrovert hat on. But this is always good fun because it's good to see Dan back. That's so exciting. Can't tell you how good that is, man.
Oh, mate, it's good to see you. It's good to just see your guys' faces and being able to interact with you. And I know I've spoken to both of you kind of over the period, but nothing like seeing you live and seeing your face in person. And I'm excited because I'm excited to hear what's going on in the market with the March numbers.
Yeah, this is maybe before we dive into the March import numbers, maybe we could just sort of talk contextually about where the market is, because this is the the quiet end of the quiet season. So this is this transitional period in the freight market where we go from the quiet season, January, February, March, always quiet. Remember on the show we said it'd be quieter than normal. It's turned out to be pretty much that. Volumes are down a little bit lower compared to this time last year. Jason Miller's truckload ton index that came out today for February has volumes down about 1% compared to February last year. So not a disaster, but volumes are clearly sliding sideways and trending down. So Jason said today that his view of the market is that demand for truckload will be pretty much sliding sideways to slightly down over the course of the year, which is, sort of important context. Cash shipments comes out today at some point, so we'll know more about that. Spot market volumes are still, if you think about the whole, we've got a much smaller pie, right? But the percentage that's moving on spot is higher as a percentage of the total loads moving. So why that's important is, carriers think that typically about 90% of volume moves on contract, 10% on spot. Because shippers are sending more volume direct to brokers rather than through routing guides direct to shippers, the volume of freight on the spot market is up to about 15% of all loads. So, we always said that a 90-10 split contract to spot was a pretty normal market. Well, it's stabilized at 85-25. So that means there's more volume moving on spot. What does that mean for people listening that are providing capacity? It means that shippers are looking for more spot market capacity to move low volume lanes. That's where the opportunity is. So if you're out there selling to anybody, any big shipper, don't just think because you don't have a lot of trucks or a lot of capacity or access to a lot of capacity. Those big shippers that move thousands of loads every week are looking for people to move 1 or 2 loads a week, maybe 1 load a month. That's where the growth is, I think, for people in the brokering and logistics space. That's a clear trend. We did a webinar with JOC last week. We had Holly on. A company escapes me. They make batteries. That's exactly what they've been doing. They've been sticking with their incumbent carriers, but looking to use the spot market more strategically. So that's where we are at the moment. Rates still haven't bottomed out. That's the bad news for carriers. I guess good news for brokers because it means margin expansion territory typically. But we're right at the bottom of the market. And again, that's fairly normal for the market to bottom out sometime before we see April seasonality kick in. So what does seasonality mean? It means in April, you start to see the effects of produce season. You start to see steel start to get shipped for construction. Machinery starts to get shipped for ahead of planting season. So generally, you see a lot more activity because it's warmer. You see a lot more. I don't know if you've been noticing out on the interstates, there's been thousands of loads of mulch moving in bags on pallets on flatbeds. So if you go to Home Depot and Lowe's, you'll see all these bags stacked up outside Home Depot and Lowe's in the car park. So that sort of volume is what moves in April, May. So that's what we're waiting for. As soon as demand starts to increase and we see a bit more seasonality and produce season starts to ship more volumes, we should see the bottom in spot rates and then they start to move back up again. So that's where we are. We're at the bottom of the market. Rates went down about a penny per mile last week. So we still haven't found the bottom, which is for carriers, that's really concerning. Luckily, diesel is coming down. It's may not go much further the way it's shaping up because we're heading into peak demand over summer, especially for gasoline in cars. So that always takes away a bit of the supply for distillates and forces up prices. So I was at the Mid-America Truck Show last week and carriers said, how should we be thinking about the market? Should we be in survival mode? And I said, absolutely. You need to be in survival mode for the next quarter because we don't know which way the market is going to go. And the one thing because diesel prices are still north of $4. But if you remember that period from 2012 to 16, diesel averaged about $4 a gallon. Like that was a really rough few years for carriers. And of course, that led into the freight recession in 2017, and then the market picked up. So we're in a precarious position. I did some analytics on the operating costs of a small truck fleet going back to 2019. And right now, with fuel where it is and spot rates where they are, if a carrier was just in the spot rates, they're getting by. They're paying wages, they're getting by. They're making about 7 cents a mile gross profit above wages and fuel and tires and all of that. So they're getting by, but the critical piece is they're really it's dangerous territory, because if you run 100,000 miles and you're making 7 cents a mile gross profit, $7,000 doesn't even pay for a third of an in-frame engine rebuild. So a lot of carriers are a major breakdown away from going out of business, right? That's the important point. When you think about rates and buying capacity, carriers will accept lower rates, but it's not sustainable for too long. That's why demand for them, it needs to pick up and diesel come down. And so what happens if that doesn't happen? Well, then we start to see the acceleration of carriers leaving the industry because it's no longer profitable. If rates continue to drop, we're sitting, if you take away fuel, we're sitting about 12 cents a mile above where 2019 was. Now, remember, 2019 was our low watermark in the last couple of cycles for rates. They just went down steadily all year. There was no peak season. It was just a grind. We had a lot of major bankruptcies. This market right now is looking more and more like 2019 every week we go further into the year. And that's a scary proposition for carriers, because we've still got a lot of capacity in the market. We've still got a lot of carriers. So we're at an intersection right now. We need to watch on this show over the next few weeks what seasonality emerges. Do we start to see a pickup in produce volumes that are meaningful to move the national needle? Or will it be like last year where it was a speed bump, where the drought in California really affected produce volumes? This year we've got excess water that's affecting the California produce market. We've got freezing cold in South Carolina that's just trashed the peach crop. All the peach trees were in bloom, and the freezing cold in March, unseasonal, wiped out most of the crop, according to some of the growers. So when you start to see things like that, where weather is playing a role, it delays and sometimes impacts produce season and volumes, and it just doesn't have that material impact that produce season normally does on dry van and spot rates. So that's where we're sitting right now. Then if we dive down into March imports, which if you guys want to fire off any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I can dive straight into what March imports like.
I have a ton.
Yeah.
Ryan's like, damn, I knew you'd have questions.
Good.
So last year was Florida and all the weather that came through and the hurricanes and all that wiped out the strawberries, I believe it was.
Yep.
So first question is, now with the peaches, did they recover down in Florida and some of the other states that were wiped out last year? So is that going to kind of overcrowd the peach, or is it kind of one with the other?
So it's a good point. Because of Hurricane Ian, Florida was way behind the season, but they actually picked up. Their volumes are about 12% higher than they were last year, the weekly volume of truckloads. So they picked up. But the Florida produce season sort of ends at the end of May when it gets too hot. So, but it's not significant enough volume to move the national needle. It moves the Florida needle. The Florida reefer needle is starting to go up because volumes are going up. So if you're a carrier running deep into Florida, that's where you'll be seeing better rates. But that was your dog. But better rates. But we're still not talking about fantastic rates. It's probably not even covering fuel costs. Well, you are, but the rates aren't that good. So to answer your question, Mexico has stepped in to pick up a lot of the volume that we lost, especially on the West Coast. So there are markets that are stepping in to pick up the volume that we're losing. Peaches are a little bit particular to that particular area. So the reason it's important, Dan, is the peach question. Vidalia onion season starts on the 16th. That's the pack date. That's when they ship. That'll run through August. Why it's important is the capacity for refrigerated trailers gets really tight when both Vidalia onions start shipping and peaches come into season in this area, right? And what it does, it's kind of the unofficial starting line of the produce season, and it kickstart the increase in demand for reefers in the southeast. Okay. So if you have a fairly big impact on peach trees, then maybe that doesn't start to move that national needle. Maybe it'll be later. So what we're looking for right now, I did some analysis the other day. Normally in refrigerated, between Vidalia onion pack date on April 16 and July 4, when spot rates increase, we typically see an increase of, and I'll tell you exactly. I think it's we see in refrigerated, we see rates go up about 21 cents, probably 20 cents a mile on average over that period of time, and a little bit less in dry van. So that's what we're looking for, is that sort of material increase in spot rates over that time. We don't know if that's going to happen. It didn't happen last year. It was very flat. So that's where we're at with the produce market. What else?
Okay. So I've got another question, because we've got kind of that juxtaposition that I see happening from 2018 to 19 again. So usually we're about 10% of the market is on spot. So having 25% of the market on spot is really good for brokers, because there's so much more volume on spot. Not so good for carriers. However, if we're looking at the annual volume of loads, to go 15% back to spot, I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of loads. So is it a fact that the spot market is having a race to the bottom again, Dean? Or is it a fact that like where is that juxtaposition happening again? Because it's normally that race to the bottom, right?
It is, because shippers have clearly been using the spot market to move loads at a cheaper rate than last year's contract rate. So that accelerates that downward trend, because the lower rates go, the more carriers get pushed out, or the more carriers in the spot market go from independent back to leased onto a bigger carrier and leave the spot market. So we haven't, if you just looked at the raw numbers, you would say we've still got more capacity than we have loads. That's why rates are still going down. So that's where we're at right now. It hasn't been a race to the bottom, Dan, because everybody is still paying really high numbers for fuel. So the one thing we saw this year, carriers exerted a lot more price discipline this time, because when rates were negotiated on the contract market, the rates were well north of $5 a gallon. So even though they're down to like $4.10 a gallon today, that's still fairly high for carriers. And I think it's a percentage of your operating costs. It's just over a third of your operating costs. So it's a significant number. It's your highest cost to run a truck. So when you're paying that much for diesel, and you've got to pay at the pump, and you're not getting paid. I mean, even if you're paying at the pump and then you're getting paid every 7 days. I mean, I know some carriers are factoring and getting paid, immediately. But there are some carriers out there that are carrying, 30-day debt from their shippers.
Fuel.
Yeah, and they've got to pay fuel.
Sure.
So it's a much more prevalent discussion this market cycle than I think it has been in years. So that's what's kept a floor price under the spot rate, I think, is what it costs to run a truck. So because it's costing a lot more to run a truck this year than it did last year. Well, sorry, it's probably about the same year over year, but you've still got that diesel price to factor into it, because we're only just lapping when Russia invaded the Ukraine, right? So diesel prices right now are exactly where they were the week before Russia invaded the Ukraine at $4.10.
Okay.
Right. So in the middle of all that,
if you're doing contract, there's a fuel surcharge included in that, which obviously isn't the full cost of fuel. There's a variable that goes into the actual line haul, right?
Right. And a lot of carriers that, even guys you talk to at the truck show in Mid-America Truck Show in Louisville 2 weeks ago now, a lot of them, there's a misconception that most of these small carriers are 100% spot market. And I don't think that's the case. A lot of people I know that are successful business have a mix of contract and spot. I was talking to my good friend of mine, runs hauls for hazardous goods here out of Boston, hazmat. He runs hazmat to the middle of the country, out to Arkansas, and they haul freight back. So how do they get freight? They go to the load boards in the broker market to haul spot market freight back. So it's contract one way, spot the other. And I think there's a lot of carriers that do that. That's why carriers are still in the industry. They're still doing well. They're still profitable. But if you're a brand new carrier and you're 100% in the spot market, that's a tough road. You're heading down a really tough road. You've got to really know your costs and make sure that you're getting some pretty hot lanes to balance some of those low lanes.
It's interesting you brought that up. I've had 4 conversations in the last 3 weeks with carriers. Some of them as big as, well, I mean, it's and Ryan will tell you this, it's respective. I mean, in Canada, a 400 fleet truck fleet is a big fleet in Canada, right? Yeah. And one of them was 275 trucks, and he's all broker.
Yeah.
No in-house customers. I said, you have no in-house customers? He says, no. I said,
Wow.
what if like one person, he said, and he's got, I mean, he deals with obviously a lot of the big brokers, both US and Canada. And he says, Dan, like I just kind of just realized this and we need to change it. I go, yeah, you do, because it's so volatile.
Yeah. Well, it was okay from, July of 2020 right through until Russia invaded the Ukraine. Absolutely no brainer. And hopefully people did what we said, and that's put money away for the rainy day. You remember that? We were saying that for the best part of 2021. Clearly some didn't. And even as last September, I went back and looked at my notes. We were saying on the show, make sure you've got January, February, March truck payments in the bank before 2022 ends. And that's turned out to be pretty good advice. Because
Ryan, you see how like genius this man is? You see that, like literally the first year of COVID, Dean was saying, guys, stash the money away, put it away.
Like a famous poet once said, Dan, his name he goes by is Jay-Z. Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. So you gotta follow the numbers, man. That's why we do data Wednesdays, and Dean's always.
The reason behind that, all of my Instagram followers, of which there's quite a few, I was watching these guys posting pictures of themselves on the beach, like with their families. And I'm thinking, dude, get back to work, make money while you can, and then go on a holiday. But I saw a lot of guys taking extended vacation, which I can't fault them for, but it just meant that people were, carriers, drivers a lot. Like if you think about drivers, they've never made more money and never wanted to spend more time at home. That's the other reason that seated truck availability numbers for large fleets aren't as good as what they'd like, because you want drivers happy and healthy. You want them spending time at home. And that's why fleets have a challenge with trying to get trucks rolling. It's not they haven't got enough trucks. A lot of large fleets will tell you they have a trouble getting drivers in the trucks to work.
Yeah.
When you're making pretty good money. So that's the other side of this.
And I see that too for the brokerage side, and maybe they're trying to find that as well, because myself as a broker, Dan, you can agree, since COVID has happened, everyone wants to work remote. I've been working remote prior to COVID. Right. So from the sales end, from the broker, as a freight broker, I'm working remote. And then you look at a driver who's like, well, everybody's mostly remote anyways. Why can't I be home in my bed every single night? Everyone's kind of realizing that work-life balance. I want to see my kids, I want to see my dogs and things like that.
Right.
And it's just adding to the fact. And one thing you said, especially about the spot market, that I kind of want to touch on a little bit, was that a lot of brokers are losing out to other brokers because of speed. So a lot of the cradle to the grave reps, they have a faster response. Let's say they get a quote and it takes, let's say 15, 20 minutes or something like that. So a lot of race to the bottom for the new brokers, like the baby brokers, they're crushing it right now because they find that load, post it on DAT, post it on ITS or whatever it is, get a quote back and book that load, rather than a company that's a well-established, like Dan says, like a big fleet. They'll call their actual partner carriers, find capacity first, and then sell it from that aspect. So that's kind of cool from the brokerage side, what we're kind of seeing as well.
And that's what carriers are doing though too. If you follow some of the stories on social media, carriers are doing the same thing. They are really quick. When they get an offer, they are accepting those loads, even if it's just ridiculously low. Because you see, the reason the videos pop up is carriers are complaining about, Dan, the race to the bottom, because in some markets carriers are undercutting themselves. Which is one of those problems. So we're in that market where the industry itself is driving rates down, and that's the great part about a free market, right? Is you have this ups and downs. We're just coming off a period of one of the biggest, ups that we've had in living history, certainly my history. But we're returning to normal, which probably is a good segue to imports, right? If that's a good way to segue, because imports in March are identical, like within 152 containers of the low point in March 2019.
Wow.
The low point in import volumes is March every year, right? So why? Because Chinese New Year, the economy slows down in China in particular. They shut down for 3 weeks, maybe a bit longer. And then you have this sort of lull. So if you go back and look at the data, which I've got in front of me back to 2015, there's a steep drop off from December, January, February, March, and then it picks back up again. So if you say, well, we've had imports drop, you remember we were above 2 million containers a month for 29 months. So that's that sort of threshold where the supply chain gets into serious trouble, when it's above 2 million for an extended period of time. It dropped back below 2 million late last year, and it's at about 1.86 million in March. So we're back to pre-COVID levels in terms of the volume of imports, which I think in and of itself is an important data point, because we had this massive surge and now we're getting back to normal. And to my previous point, you'll find a lot of data points now that point to this market shaping up a lot like 2019 did in many ways, both from a supply and demand perspective. So volumes are up about 5% month over month, which is, again, in line with exactly where we would expect volumes to start to increase in March. Some of the data points, when you go back and look at, and I'll just quickly pull up my chart here for imports, total imports compared to this time last year, we are sitting about total, we're down about 28% year over year, so but up 5% month over month. So we are now starting to go into a period where the year over year comps are going to look ridiculous, because we had this massive surge in imports last year. So don't pay too much attention to the year over year numbers. Pay attention to the total, and the total number of imports are tracking with 2019 low point, which is good. They generally go up from here, which again is good. East Coast volumes up 1.5%, West Coast up 12%. So this is another interesting data point for the month of March. Los Angeles retained its number one status as the biggest import volume port in the country, which it had lost that until, what was it, probably the last 5 or 6 months. It had all been the East Coast. So to me, that's an interesting data point in and of itself. I'm just trying to pull up the total. Here's my imports. So just to go through some of the summary points, Los Angeles back to number one, handling the majority of the volume. Long Beach number two. Furniture still the highest. It's the number one commodity for imports. Still around 13% of all containers that come into the country are furniture. Up 27% in the last month, but down by about half compared to this time last year. New York, volumes are sliding all over the country compared to last year, but across the country we're seeing pretty good imports start to come back up, which again I think is really good news. At a coast level, if I could just find my chart. Any questions while I just dig up this other chart, guys?
I have one, unless Ryan's got a question.
No, go for it, buddy.
So, Dean, in 2019, when we were talking, we had said that you couldn't compare anything to 2018 because it was kind of that anomaly year. So now when we're doing comparisons, are we not comparing 2021, 22, 2020, 21, and 22 because of COVID? And we're kind of reverting back almost to 2017 comparison? Yeah,
I do, Dan. I do, because there were such outliers in statistical terms, right? You had no seasonality. You had a completely disrupted supply chain. You had labor shortages, warehouses bulging with inventory, 23 miles of trains backed up out of Chicago because there was no space. There was no space to unload containers. Ships were sitting, there was 107 vessels waiting on average 3 weeks to get unloaded. So it just crippled the entire supply chain. And I just think you can't look at any data point in 2021, even 2022 for 3/4 of the year, all of 2021, and then even 2022, because the market was still recovering from the whiplash effect. And then on top of that, you had Russia invade the Ukraine and diesel go to $5.80 a gallon, the most it's ever been. So there were so many things that happened in that, the 20s, probably you could call it a 3-year period, that were just extraordinary, that really were unusual and not indicative of how the freight market works. So that's why I don't go to those markets and say, where are we compared to the most recent market that was similar to this one? Like, where are we? And that's why 2019, even though it was a terrible year for carriers, a great year for brokers and shippers, that's the year when you didn't have any aberrations, like any sort of statistical outliers. to cripple the data, even 2018. So you could go back to any of those years before that, and they would be, reliable indicators. 2018 was a good year for freight. 2019 wasn't so good. So there's still 2 years that I like to look at and say, where are we in 2023 vis-a-vis those 2 years?
And do you see, because I know when COVID first hit, and when we were talking, we talked a lot about, carriers watch, don't go and buy all sorts of new equipment because, there's a lot of freight in the market. It kind of created that 2018 into 19 where all this extra capacity was in the market because people in 2018 were like, I'm getting into this industry. It's a cash cow. I'm going to do it. And all this new equipment came in. During COVID, it was very tough to get equipment, not so tough now to get equipment. Right. Is that contributing to what we see now when it comes to overcapacity in the market, or is it just like, because I know a lot of fleets were replacing equipment, not necessarily growing, right. But then after 2 or 3 years of huge numbers and big, like just big volumes, no seasonality, it was just constant flow. Did we lose track and forget about that up and down and that huge roller coaster 18, 19 and kind of just go back to let's grow?
We've kind of repeated the same thing, except it's taken longer over a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. So it was we always knew what went up had to come down, but a lot of carriers didn't sort of factor in the timing of that. So a lot of carriers bought overpriced equipment. That excess capacity from the amazing number of new carriers that entered the market is, some of those carriers are still here and still struggling to get by. So the carriers that were smart paid off a lot of debt because they were making so much money and they're fine and doing well. But there's still carriers out there that are struggling. So used truck prices are coming down. In March, JD Power reported that there was a big influx of high mileage trucks onto the market, used trucks at auction. Again, that's 2 things. One is carriers getting out and auctioning their equipment. 2, large fleets selling their longer mileage used trucks. Smaller fleets. So we're starting to see, the market turn back to equilibrium. But when equilibrium means, supply equals demand, in this case right now, we've still got more trucks as a result of the hangover effect of the record number of new trucks that came in primarily in 2021, right? So 2021 was the big year, and then it gradually tailed off. When diesel prices spiked in about March, April, you started to see more carriers leaving than were coming in. Right. And then so there's always carriers coming and going. And it turned negative in October last year. So when I say that, we had more carriers leaving than were coming in October last year. It's been negative ever since, although it's improving. So the rate of people leaving is slowing down and starting to come back up again. So we're still not, remember, we're talking about really small numbers here. So when I say to you that there were 2,000 more carriers left the industry than came in, that's like less than 1% of the total number of trucks on the road. Like it's a really small number. So when people start talking doom and gloom about the truckload industry, they're talking about the outer edge of the market. These are really narrow bands of carriers that play in the spot market and that are subject to market volatility. And when those carriers leave, it doesn't move the whole industry needle significantly, but it does move the spot market needle, because if they're like that carrier that you said had 200 trucks all in the spot market, then those sorts of numbers make a meaningful difference to how the spot market performs.
100%.
So I pulled up some data here for us on imports, a couple of data points. We talked last year a lot about the shift from east to west. You could deduce from the March data that has slowed down. East Coast volumes up 2% month over month. East Coast volumes are down 2% month over month. West Coast volumes up 12% month over month. So Los Angeles Long Beach sort of reclaimed their number 1 spot for imports. Imports are definitely slowing down on the East Coast. Again, you can't look at the year-over-year numbers, but I think from now on we'll start to see more of a return to normal, although you could say what's normal about the ILWU having labour stoppages at the Port of Long Beach in Los Angeles where it closed down last week, right? So that's that's still a big red flag for shippers, and why you should expect to see East Coast volumes come back up. Because shippers rightly avoided the West Coast because they were afraid of labour stoppages, work stoppages and strikes. Last week, they had a work stoppage that closed the ports. Even on Monday this week, there was I saw some rumblings about labour shortages and go slows and that sort of thing going on. So that's where we are there. Ports, again, I covered the ports. Houston volumes up 7%, sorry, up 5% month over month. Again, that state is driving a lot of the truckload volume in Texas. Pretty good numbers there for carriers. I think you'll see that coming along. And the other one I look at down there is Mobile, Alabama. Volumes are up 17% month over month. It's when you look along that Gulf Coast, there's a couple of ports there that generally are doing pretty well. Savannah is the big one. Volumes were down 3% on the East Coast. New York down 2%. But Los Angeles, Long Beach saw a return to more positive month-over-month gains over there.
And that changes the truckload market as well.
Well, it does, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what's 12%? If you can give us an estimated TEU on the 12% increase in California.
So it's 278,000 versus 227,000 the month before.
So that's a lot of 20-foot equivalents.
Yeah.
Right? Like a ton.
Yeah.
And that truckload volume. And then on the East Coast, if you're down, was it 7% or 3% in Savannah?
Down 3%. Yeah.
3%. So you're probably in what, 5,000, somewhere around there? 5,000 TEU?
Yep. So, I think I know where you're going with this, because for the first time in weeks, capacity tightened in California. Spot market capacity, right? So again, we talked about this all of last year. There was a very tight correlation between the number of imports surging into a port, the amount of vessels at anchor waiting and the congestion, and how much popped into the spot market because it had to move quickly because of the delays. So even in California, state rates were up 5 cents a mile last week, only $1.82. Los Angeles rates are up. Again, they've been heading down for the last 3 weeks, but even Los Angeles, Seattle up 12 cents a mile to 226. Loads to Stockton. So Stockton's the biggest warehouse market in California, other than Ontario. A lot of imports go to Stockton, just outside of San Francisco. Rates are up to 250 a mile. Phoenix was the other one we talked about a lot, which is a direct beneficiary of imports from Asia, straight along the I-10. They were up slightly at 222, but in context, the lowest in 12 months, right? Because imports have come way down. So if you think back to where we were at the peak of the imports and the congestion, we were north of $4 a mile. So rates have come way down on all of those lanes. West Coast volume, a flatbed, dry van, and reefer. Capacity tightened last week on the West Coast. And I mean, we can't draw a direct line between the number of containers and the number of loads in the spot market, because the containers have to be transloaded unless they're being drayed further inland. But that's good news for the West Coast, is capacity is starting to tighten a little bit. And because California has always been sort of the way to take the pulse of the US trucking industry. You know, what happens out there generally flows inland. Because so much of our rail network is built around, the long-haul rail network is built around freight moving off the West Coast further inland to either Memphis, Dallas, Phoenix to a lesser degree, but mostly Chicago. So good news there. I think it's good news that volumes are up in March, but returning to where they would normally be before the pandemic. So I think that's a good sign for carriers. Remember, imports only account for at most about 10% of truckload volume in total. So it's not the number to watch completely, although it attracted a lot of headlines last year. The real numbers to watch, Jason Miller's truckload ton mile index and some of the manufacturing numbers. They're the hard numbers to watch in terms of the market directionality. When you put it all together, the market is kind of moving sideways, but maybe slightly down over the course of the year. Hence the reference to 2019, where we had an oversupplied market from 2018's record truck acquisitions. The market cooled. It didn't crash, but it just cooled all year And if you remember, I think last time I looked at it, rates kind of dropped like 10 cents a mile over the course of the year. It was just like a gradual downward trend. But when you had more and more capacity from 2018 entering the market, it just accelerated the exodus of carriers out of the market. So our worst case scenario.
There was some lanes in 2019, Dean, that were just pathetic. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine, he's got a 65 truck fleet. He was getting brokers offering him $350 from Montreal to Toronto.
Wow.
One of the heaviest lanes in Canada.
Yeah.
And depending on who you use, you know, you're $900 to $1,100, that kind of area,
Yeah.
$350. And he was like, that's a stupid rate. He goes, well, I got 5 guys that want it. What do you want to do?
And that's what's happening now.
Yeah. And it's very sad because as a broker, and you know, Ryan will attest to this, you know, like those people bring down the overall name of what a lot of us are trying to achieve. Right. And it's build a good business, take care of our customers, help our customers achieve their goals, and live well. Right. And take care of them instead of playing this idiotic game. And it's this is the time when it gets frustrating as a broker. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of thinking, you know, about 2019. There's so many similarities with that year. The number of carriers posting their trucks on our load boards are very similar to 2019 numbers in the spot market. Rates are kind of still above that, but heck, this is a really important time for everybody in the market, right? Because rates and volumes show signs of bottoming out. We're in between seasons. It's that bit in between high tide and low tide. It's what have they got? The slack tide. What's right? Jeff saying? I missed his note there.
He's chilling out in Marco Island.
Oh, is he?
So jealous of me. Yeah, he's
watching us. What a rock star!
Yeah.
God, I love that. But here's the point: we've all got to watch and be very careful of. If volumes and rates don't bottom out, and there's a prolonged period of time at these levels, that's going to have a substantial impact on carriers. Because my worst fear is diesel doesn't drop below $4 a gallon. Is it goes back up during the summer. Now, $4.12 a gallon, just for context, that's the national average. When I went to Louisville, when I rolled into the Flying J at Carlisle, $5.05. $5.05. I paid 95 cents a gallon more than the national average. And I'm too dim-witted to realize that if I'd have kept going a bit further and got to West Virginia, I'd have paid under like $3.90 a gallon. Because when you hit the top of West Virginia, you got like 2 exits. Otherwise, you're toast. And then you're into Ohio. And when I was coming back on the Saturday night, it was like 4 a.m, and I'm trucking along through Ohio, and then I hit West Virginia, and in the corner of my eye, I see $3.45. And it's green. I'm thinking, diesel, heck. And so by the time I woke up and realized what was going on and where I was, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I'm back to $5.05 a gallon. So, but here's the thing. I wheeled into the truck stop, and then right next door is Speedway, 30 cents a gallon cheaper than the Pilot truck stop at $5.05. So the point I'm trying to make is survivability right now for carriers is really contingent upon how well you're buying diesel. You know, what your fuel card discounts are like, where you buy your fuel, all those sorts of things. So these are precarious times. I'm hoping the diesel prices continue to come down, but I'm not optimistic because the last 2 weeks they've kind of started to flatten out. That decline that we've seen is starting to flatten out a little bit, and that could be a precursor of what's happening in summer, especially when you think about the broader OPEC and Russia deal, cutting back production. That sort of starts to have an impact on us nationally. So watch this space. We'll watch this very carefully. I think we'll talk about seasonality, and we should, on this show for the next 3 or 4 weeks, because this market will turn or not on seasonality emerging for the first time in probably 4 years, 3 years at least, certainly since 2019.
And what's the rate ratio right now for spot market with fuel?
So it's without fuel, it's $1.68 a mile. So it's about $2.12 a mile with fuel. So the all-in spot rate is national average is about $2.12 all in.
Okay, so that's what fuel's becoming 33% of.
It's about. I had it
somewhere
about
around there.
34% yesterday. Yeah, 34% of my operating costs is diesel right now.
So that's a scary number when you're in the spot market.
Yeah, especially if you don't know your operating costs. I mean, that's the wild card, Dan. Is a lot of folks might not know what it really costs to run a truck. If I could, I'll just pull up the spreadsheet here. It's actually 36%. It's 63 cents a mile is the cost of diesel right now. 63 cents a mile. If you've got a calculator or you're good at math, 63 cents a mile plus 55 cents a mile to the driver. Yes, and I have to use a calculator with really big buttons to do that because I'm slow and dim-witted. It's $1.18. $1.18 just with fuel, and you add 31 cents to that for finance, and like you get to $1.80 a mile to run a truck down the road really, really quickly as an average.
Yeah.
So,
and that's without a profit, and that's anything goes wrong, like you said, and you're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Yikes.
Yeah.
Well,
so these are precarious times.
Down and let's hope brokers stay on the up and up, and shippers as well, right? I mean, let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
if your budget was blown out of proportion for years, your bosses now, if they hear capacity and and it's over capacity and well, let's start buying better.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think I think a lot of shippers, have good memories. I think the trend that Ryan and I've talked about on the show, and Jeff, is that shippers exercised a lot more discipline also this time around. Rather than driving the market down, they stayed with their incumbent carriers. They looked for rate discounts in exchange for more volume. So they work with their carriers that played nicely during the pandemic. But they did that sort of switch where they sent a lot of those low volume lanes direct to the spot market, which is a really strategic buy of capacity at a more controlled price. And I think that's where the opportunities are for a lot of people in the broking space. Is there will be carriers out there that are looking for good deals, but at the same time, they are acutely aware this market's going to turn this year and capacity will tighten. And then we're back to where we were. So whilst they might be thinking about getting, good spot rate, deals, I don't know that they'll be doing that on a lot of certainly won't be doing it on high volume lanes, because that capacity will evaporate on them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So
the second they turn it off, it won't get turned back on for a very long time.
Yeah, there are shippers out there that, of course, play that market. They're very transactional in nature because they know that they can always move loads and they don't have a lot of volume. So I think that's where I'd be looking. I said to carriers the same thing at Mid-America Truck Show on the Pro Talk stage. I said that's where I'd be looking. I wouldn't be not calling Procter & Gamble because I'm a small owner-operator. I'd be calling them saying, hey, I want you one load a month, because I'm here I'm here once a month, or I'm once a week. I think that's where there's opportunity for people right now, because shippers are looking for those big carriers are looking for capacity in the same area when they get loads in from their customers. A lot of carriers have their own network. So small carriers could do the same thing, building relationships with large carriers.
Yeah. Awesome. It's like Ryan said at the beginning, the cradle to grave brokers are getting to the market and back to customers faster and getting all these loads. I just really hope you're not driving the price down because you have 6 people that call you on one lane.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. That's where we're at right now. We hear lots of stories about people undercutting each other, whether it be brokers or carriers. Like you've still got a lot of people in this industry, even though there's sort of job cuts all around. There's a lot of people that are looking for freight, and there's less of it. So so that's sort of my freight market update. Good to have you back, Dan, with your
thanks, buddy.
questions. You'd be very proud of Ryan and Jeff. They've done a fantastic job.
You know what? Yeah. I'm blessed and to even know them and call them friends and just what they've done over the past 6-7 months is originally it was supposed to be a couple of weeks, and then it turned into 6-7 months, and to have people in your corner like that, it's amazing. I'm truly honored to know them and call them friends. So
we've got them. I think we locked in the dates. Gee, I hope we did, Ryan. The 18th. So you're on next Tuesday, right?
I'm on next Tuesday. We're going to talk some fun stuff on that IQ. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and then Jeff's on the week after talking about shipper and RFP trends and whatever
Jeff's
else.
Not going to talk about RFPs, is he?
I don't know.
Jeff never talks about RFPs.
No,
ever. I bet you he doesn't make a single sales call. I love you, Jeff. Go enjoy the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing you
So,
said, Dean, that was
yeah.
was really important when I was reading actually your March import was that you said that like furniture is definitely up, but footwear is going down. And I started to think about it myself, right? It's not something that I don't think we talk about this all the time, so we'll just go over it a little bit. But we talk about, hey, Foot Locker's closing 600 stores in the next 4 years. Nordstrom has completely left Canada, and they have a footwear department as well. Talking to another customer as well with one of the big companies, footwear companies, like they're moving all to e-commerce. Why would imports be down if e-commerce is going to be up and that's the only where to get a pair of, let's say, certain footwear shoes?
It's a good question. I think we've still got the hybrid work model. I think people are still not, wearing out shoes at the same rate they would have normally wore them out. Gosh, I haven't bought a pair of shoes in maybe a couple of years now. But so yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I have the answer to why that is. I know that people do have a lot of excess inventory of the wrong types of, commodities from last year. So we'll just have to watch that one. So the footwear volumes down 33% year to date, down 50% year over year, down 15% month over month. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that
Year
buying
over
experience.
year down 50%.
33.
Half of what year to date, 33% year to date, 50% year over year. I think that, Ryan, that has to have a lot to do with the bloated inventories we would have seen out of 2021. People still have a lot of that inventory. They're still.
I can only think like construction. I think like workers, steel toe boots and stuff like that. If they're buying quality over quantity, like, hey, if you're going to pair through us like steel toe boots, $60 every 3 months, or hey, let me pay $200 on this one-time purchase and it's going to last me 6 months rather than those 3 months. So I think that's something we're going to be looking at. And one thing that we always I look at too, that buying experience of going to go buy shoes, it's just not there anymore. Going into like a Foot Locker, going into like a Sport Check. Like I remember the butterflies you had, like, oh my God, I pick a shoe, try on like 10 different shoes, buy 1 or 2 of them and leave. And it's just like, I think now you already know if you're a basketball player, athlete, or going to the gym. A lot of people are obviously buying shoes for the gym. They already know what they're going to buy. So it's like, okay, well, do I want it now or let me just buy it online and let it come in like 3 to 5 days and let's see what kind of happens.
Yeah, I mean,
is it also different? I mean, I know when I was going to the gym, I had a pair of shoes just for the gym. So like when I got to the gym, I would take my shoes off. But when I was younger, I just wear my sneakers normally and I'd go to the gym. So at the gym, you're not really wearing out the shoes, right?
No.
Because it's not on concrete, the rubber's not going. So it's, I don't know, maybe that somebody will buy 3 pairs of shoes, 1 for inside, 1 for outside, 1 for the gym. And those shoes don't get used as much as they used to. I mean, I know I just bought 2 pairs of shoes from Amazon for the first time in God knows how long. They came from China and I had them in 3 days.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, I think, Dan, the other part of this is, guys, could be inflation. I mean, people could have changed their buying habits and put off buying, that discretionary spend. I think that's a big part of it. Also, maybe people are just not buying as many shoes for a variety. So. It's kind of counterintuitive, though, isn't it, Ryan? When you think about it, that as we go back to work more, we should be buying more shoes. But I think we've still got the excess inventory problem.
I think it's the excess inventory because when you look at it, not a lot of people are going back to the office anymore. So you got those people who are just kind of home, and then you had the layoffs kind of happen. Obviously, that's happened short term, so that's not going to affect imports. But you look at a company that work at retail clothing store, we get like different clothing every day, and they would sit there for like months until we got to send it back to the DCs, and then they'll put it in the discount bin and all that stuff. And it's just like, I feel like, and this is just a completely different topic, but you kind of look at, I would love to kind of know like the world's population as well, because like we have a running joke within our group chat that people are adopting dogs than having kids, so you look at that as well, like that whole buying kids clothes or buying kids shoes and all that stuff, and hand-me-downs. I know Danny could attest to this. A lot of hand-me-downs are being used instead of buying brand new stuff to kind of curb inflation. So we'll see how that kind of goes.
Ryan, you're big in the dog industry.
Yep.
Do you see a lot of dogs being given back now?
Not so. I'd say yes and no. What I have seen on the rescue side, which is pretty cool, is that you would So everybody thinks like, well, not thinks there's a misconception that if you're gonna go return your dog or rehome your dog, it's such like a guilty feeling. Like you have that bad feeling of somebody thinking, oh, why would you do that, or you're irresponsible and all that stuff. But now I've seen like the SPA, which is the Humane Society, they've set up programs and like buckets where like if you've lost your job, if you've lost your house and you can't have this pet right now, they will support you and foster your dog until you get back on your feet. So I don't see most
That's
dogs.
very
I think
cool.
the biggest problem that we have, Dan and Dean, is that, and this is just me personally working in rescue, is that we try to import too many dogs from like the States, around the world. And I understand we gotta, give them a better life and stuff like that when we have such a big problem here in Canada. I'm of the type like, hey, protect our own, and then we can kind of go for there. But I know that's different thoughts there. So
100%.
that's what I'm personally seeing on my end.
See, because when COVID hit, right, so many people started buying dogs. Like breeders were like, you almost had to put your name in a pot for like 2 breeds down the road, two
Yep.
litters down the road. So I was curious to see if now that people are kind of getting back into the workforce, some remote, some not. Some people are being unfortunately forced to go back into the office.
Yep.
Where now almost feel like maybe not necessarily you can afford it, but the dog's not getting the life that you want for it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so I was wondering if there was any kind of correlation with new.
Well, if you want to
animals
talk
coming
about
in
like
for dogs.
opportunities, I always feel like there's opportunities for everything. And just like how Dean always kind of mentions his wife's catering business, like was booming like during COVID and things like that. There's such an opportunity right now for like dog walkers, dog sitters. If you do Rover and those things, like even Dan, my customer who's right by you, and Aaron, Bold Canine, I was chatting with them at the Pet Expo on the weekend. And it's just like their daycare has become at capacity. That's like a wait list. Think about that, right?
Yeah.
A wait list for a dog daycare, So
Yep.
it's interesting to kind of see the different things.
Well,
But
they're
you're so
awesome.
right.
Their daycare is awesome, though.
Right.
That's why I work with them. That's why they're my customer.
Yeah, they are. They have
So,
the
Dean,
doodle crew. It's all the
what do you
golden
got?
doodles in one crew.
Yeah. They got the little gangs. We'll leave it at that. But Dean, I know you were at Matt's. How was Matt's? I know you saw LV Shane. What do you got coming up? Let's hear what you got going on.
So TIA next week, Capital Ideas Conference in Orlando, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even into Saturday. So that's the big broker event on the calendar for the year. Bunch of travel. So I've got a bunch of conferences to speak at for Great West Casualty, talking about how to use ELD data to predict accidents. Spoke at the Boise, Idaho one 2 weeks ago during Matt's at the one-day trip. Had to fly out there from Louisville. It was an 18-hour day for a 1-hour spot on stage, but we had about 300 fleets from the Pacific Northwest there. Yeah, so it's a really good way to connect with carriers and teach them about how to use data to identify drivers who are probably going to fall asleep and do themselves injuries. So that's sort of the big thing that's coming up for me in the next 3 or 4 weeks, is wrapping up those conferences. We've got our big symposium coming up in Carmel, California, where all of our top brokers come in for our annual get-together. So it's a busy month to travel. April and May are sort of busy months of travel for us. It's sort of the peak in conferences and travel before you get into the summer holiday period.
Perfect. Well, you know what? Give a nice big boost just before summer, and then you can roll into summer and enjoy it, Dean, for sure. That's awesome.
Can convalesce with my knee surgery.
With
my new knee.
There you go.
My new knee.
Now, did you plan that, or no? That just kind of rolled out.
I couldn't walk at Mid America, so I was just in too much pain because I just called the doctor and said, "Let's do it. Let's get the new knee." So it'll be the 4th surgery on this knee, and hopefully this is the last. It's my
wow.
They'll rebuild you, put some bionic in there, so you can't go through a metal detector ever again.
It's my ass-kicking leg. So.
Remind me not to meet Dean this year.
yeah. It's the one Dean's gonna kick all the doors down with. Yeah. Well, you know what? You can get some AI chat GPT in there if you want to. Why not?
You know what? I might get some chips put in there just that people can patch into, because we know the chips are coming. We know they're going to put chips in.
Is there Wi-Fi? I would love to connect to Dean's knee. Dean's knee.
While we're there,
Dean's knee gets hacked and he starts kicking people at conferences. Some guy's got a joystick.
I hope nobody from Marvel is listening to this conversation and makes a movie out of it. We got to get royalties on this, So the next Marvel superhero. This is awesome, dude. So we want to thank you so much for coming out this morning. It's always a pleasure. I know we missed last week. Things like that. Tomorrow, tune us in. We'll hit the replay back at 2 and 6 p.m. If you found value in this, which I know you did. Please like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with a neighbor, share it with the Amazon driver who's bringing your packages today because you know your wife ordered some packages last night. So with that being said, Dan, take us home, my man.
Oh, me.
Yes, do it.
Jeez, right. You just totally throw me under the bus here. I don't know. You know, looking forward. Thanks, guys. I'm so happy to be back. Looking forward to this. This is going to be fun. So, everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.